Backyard Farmer is a co-production of NET Television and Nebraska Extension.
Tonight on Backyard Farmer, we'll be checking out a new addition to our garden, and we'll follow up a lawn renovation. That's all coming up next, right here on Backyard Farmer. Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd and we're glad you could join us for another hour of answering your gardening questions. Joining me on the panel tonight, we have experts from Nebraska Extension. We have, for the very first time this season, Wayne Onosaur answering all of our insect questions.
Good evening, Kim.
Bill Kreuzer, turf and weeds.
Hi, Kim. How are you, buddy?
Kevin Corus is going to answer all those rots and spots questions.
Hello, hello.
And Sarah gets the beauty of horticulture.
Good to be here, Kim.
You can get your questions answered by dialing 402-472-1212. Our toll-free number is 1-800-676-5446. If you'd like to send us an email or pictures for a future show, that address is byf@unl.edu. When you send us an email and attach that picture, please tell us as much information as you can, including where you live in the state. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow our tweets on Twitter, and look at our video features on YouTube. And before we get to questions, let's look at samples. And this is really exciting, Wayne. It is, even though it's an insect.
I have with me today an insect that my father-in-law collected for me last year in Iowa. This is a 17-year cicada. And yes, the nymph spends 16 years underground feeding on plant roots, feeding on the sap there. And they come out. We have 15 broods in North America. This year we have brood 4 coming out, and that includes Nebraska and Kansas, primarily along the Missouri River. So sorry for those of you out in the Panhandle and maybe anywhere west of Lincoln. You're gonna have to make a road trip to go see these things. But they can come out in extremely high densities. There's 3 species that are coming out in Nebraska. We have 2. We have this one, which is Magicicada cassini, and then we have Septum decim. Those are the 2 that we have. You know, lovely names.
Known by all the rest of us as 17-year.
Yeah, 17-year cicada. And in fact, at Fontenelle Forest, they're having a walk in the woods and everything around this particular insect on June 6th. So if you're interested, you can go out and get a guided walkthrough.
Excellent. Thank you, Wayne. That's very exciting. All right, Bill, turf in 6-pack, which is not normally how it is purchased.
Well, yeah, generally when you have to go to the greenhouse and grab something quick, you get in a 6-pack. But before I spent the day talking about weeds, I wanted to talk about the grass I actually care about, the plant I care about, and that's grass. And the grasses that we have in our lawns in Nebraska. And the 2 predominant species are tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. And each one is really set up to be perform well in either eastern Nebraska, the tall fescue, or the bluegrass in western Nebraska. And so I want to just kind of quickly show how you identify these 2, so you know what you have in your lawn, and maybe you may not be unsure of what kind of grass you have. And so the tall fescue is this guy here on the right side. You'll notice right away that it's a little bit wider leaf, which is easy to tell now when you have bluegrass right next to it. But a better, easier way to kind of distinguish this tall fescue is just pull it out and then roll it in your fingers. And you'll kind of feel it's round and smooth. And so that's the tall fescue. It has that kind of a feel to it. Whereas the Kentucky bluegrass has a folded, it's called vernation. So we grab one of these plants and roll it through our fingers. You kind of feel like a ridge or a fold or a crease. And so that's how we can identify the Kentucky bluegrass. We can have some other ways too, looking at, you know, boat-shaped tips. And it's actually important to kind of know, because we manage our turf depending on if it's bluegrass or tall fescue. So, you know, get down on your knees and see what kind of grass you have on your lawn, and then we'll manage appropriately depending on what you have.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. All right, Kevin, this is not a happy sample.
No. I have a Japanese tree lilac, and it is sad. It has a disease, and what does that disease look like? Does that remind you of anything, Kim?
That would be fire blight, only you say it's not.
It's not. So this looks a lot like fire blight, and fire blight is a disease of plants in the Rosaceae family, mostly apples. This is a Japanese tree lilac, as I said. This is a bacterial disease, so it's very close to fire blight, but it's caused by a bacterium in a different genus. This is a Pseudomonas that's doing this. And this is distinguishable from something like winter kill because, as you can see, as the name implies, it's called fire blight. So it almost looks like it's been burnt. It's very dark, almost black, and the leaves are attached. And at the very tip, you get what's called a shepherd's crook. So there you go. If I turn that, you can see how it's curved like a shepherd's staff, and that's really indicative of this type of bacterial disease. So you can see on the sample that I have, this is what you would need to prune out if you do have something like this in your tree. So you want to prune a good 6 to 12 inches below where you see leaves dying. The bacterium is able to travel within that plant, and it can go down that stem and be in the plant further than where it creates symptoms. So it can look like you have healthy green leaves, but the bacterium is actually present there. So take a good strong pruning shears, prune it out 6 to 12 inches below where you're seeing the dead leaves. And then if you have several of these in your trees, make sure you sterilize your pruning tools in between each cut so that you're not spreading the bacterium around. So you can do that by dipping them in either a 10% bleach solution or 70% isopropyl alcohol solution for about 30 seconds. And if you do that, make sure before you put your tools away, you rinse them in water and dry them out because you don't want them to rust. So this is bacterial blight in lilac. Looks a lot like fire blight in the Rosaceae family. Prune it out. It's the result of the cool, damp weather and the storms and the hail that we have. Bacteria like to take advantage of wounds, and as you can see, this has been hit with some hail, so
Excellent.
you might be seeing it around.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, Sarah. Beautiful.
Yeah. This is a great plant that's blooming right now called the Baptisia. And the Baptisia, one of the common names is false blue indigo, but obviously this one's not blue. This is Baptisia spherocarpa, and it's obviously a yellow flowered Baptisia. Great plant for an early spring or kind of a early summer flower. And a very tough perennial. They get to be about 2 to 3 feet tall. This one happened to be about 3 feet tall with lots and lots of flower spikes. And the flowers look like little bean flowers, like a sweet pea or something along that line, because they are actually in the legume family. Each stalk of flowers will last for several weeks, and so you'll get to enjoy them for quite a long time. And then the flower is followed by a bean pod that comes on later in the season. And some crafty people like to use the bean pods in like dried flower arrangements. So the Baptisias do really well in, their ideal location would be kind of a moist, well-drained soil. But once they're established, they can also do well in sand or in very dry conditions. So this is one of the Baptisias. We're going to come back a little bit later and look at some more Baptisias too.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. All right, Wayne, you get the first picture question. One of many about this item. This is actually a viewer in Omaha who said 10 days ago his roses were perfect, and then all of a sudden overnight the oldest leaves turn to lace. He wonders what it is and what to do about it.
All right. Well, this is usually a pretty easy one. I would get this every year, and usually I'd bring a sample in. In fact, Kim brought one in. It still has the little culprit on it. Oh, he crawled off. We'll leave him on the table. But they're called rose slugs. And the particular species that I see in Nebraska is the bristly rose slug. There's a straight rose slug, and you tell them apart. One looks a whole lot slimier than the other. It doesn't very scientific, but it's really the best way to tell them apart. You can get rid of them with a good blast of water. They can't crawl back up on the plant. If you do choose to use any kind of systemic or topical insecticide on that plant, you're going to need to make sure you cover the bottom side of those leaves, especially with the topical, in order to get them.
Flicking is good too.
Or finger smashing if you're into revenge.
Flick. All right, Bill. We have a viewer who has a weed that they would like identified.
Okay.
And then
Try my
they would
best.
like to know the control measure, and I suspect there are many people who are going to be intrigued with this one.
Yep, this is Asiatic dayflower, and it's an annual, and it's found kind of in areas of the lawn that struggle with weeds that are thin, near the the concrete, and it's an annual, so it's something that we may be able to control preventatively in the spring with the pre-emergence application. But once you got it, you just try to mow it. It's actually difficult to control chemically, so there really isn't a lot we can do for it. Some research from Iowa State in soybeans showed that 3 applications of Roundup, for example, was required to give only 80% control. So it's really difficult to control this pest weed. And so we really want to just try to promote good turf grass health whenever possible. And if it's in an environment, maybe a lawn that's a little too shaded with dogs, you might want to try not turf and mulch or something to try to keep these type of weeds out, because it's kind of a losing proposition.
Easy to pull in this kinds of conditions.
Yeah,
too.
pull right out.
Lots of fun. All right, Kevin, we have a viewer who has a bur oak planted spring of 2014. They're in Fort Calhoun, so a little bit north, 15 feet tall. Leaves are doing this. And we have had others who have had oaks doing the same thing this year.
See, so it looks like, especially on that first picture, that most of the lesions are confined to the veins, and so that's a good indication of anthracnose, and that's a pretty common fungal leaf blight disease, and unfortunately it has a very large host range. So oaks and sycamores, and there's maples and a lot of other trees, even ash, I believe, are all hosts of anthracnose. Typically, it doesn't result in limb dieback or tree death. The severity of the disease will depend on the environment in the spring. So if we have a little bit drier conditions in the spring, then we won't see as much. Of course, we've had perfect conditions for this kind of thing. So it may vary from year to year. If you are having it on one tree continuously and it looks like it is maybe causing some shoot dieback, you can gain some preventative control by applying a copper-based fungicide early in the spring as those new leaves are shooting out. Get them on there to protect it from the fungus, and that will provide some control. So, and remove the leaves is another cultural practice. The leaves that fall in the fall, remove them and get them away from the tree if you can. Burn them if you can, or bury them.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Sarah, this is a viewer who actually sent us pictures earlier thinking he had voles, and then this is the follow-up on, and there were 3 or 4 images of about this same poor, sad-looking spruce. So what do we think is going on for real here?
Well, there could be several things going on here. It looks like he's got some needles turning brown. If that just appeared this spring, then my suspicion would be some winter desiccation possibly. But you've also got that rock bed around the base of the tree, and so there could be some reflected heat coming up onto the tree from that rock, which could also cause some needle browning. It looks like there's also a little bit of branch dieback there at the bottom of the tree, and I might look to larger issues like possibly some planting issues or something that would have caused that branch dieback. So I think you just need to address the overall health of this tree. If it were my tree, I would get rid of the rock. I would, put in a wood chip mulch. It's a much, much better growing environment for a tree. Prune away any of the branches that are dead. Keep the tree well watered when we get into the hot, drier part of the summer, and see how the tree progresses. If it puts out a good amount of new growth, then you might be okay. The tree might be able to turn the corner. So just some good management practices, I think, could go a long ways with this tree.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, the backyard farmer garden is getting a little bigger. In recent weeks, students from the Doctor of Plant Health program at the university were busy installing a diagnostic garden, and that's the focus of our first feature tonight.
Today we're prepping for a garden which we're calling the Kasner Grad Student Diagnostic Garden. It came about because we wrote a grant to Dow, who was funding projects for science, and we wrote a grant to start this diagnostic garden. And the goal of it is that students from different disciplines are going to be able to come out here and work together on a project in conjunction with each other, and hopefully garner a lot of good experience, learning from people with different backgrounds, and also hopefully gain some experience with outreach. But the students out here aren't just Doctor of Plant Health students. These are also graduate, master's, and PhD students in entomology, plant pathology, agronomy, horticulture. So we've got a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. So our goal here is to try to get our garden to look as nasty as possible with diseases and insects and anything else we induce. We're trying to simulate some conditions that should be conducive to disease and bring some insects in.
we're doing a diagnostic garden with some of the graduate students. It's a co-collaborative effort between the Doctor of Plant Health students, entomology students, horticulture students, pathology students in the different graduate departments. So with this particular piece of garden, we're gonna go ahead and let the insects come in, and we're gonna go ahead and see a little bit of what that damage does and what those insects looks like, whether those are good insects, bad insects, identifying them by maybe species or family.
Year one, we're trying to keep it relatively simple, so we're installing some irrigation. And the main thing we're going to try to do is water it, ideally overwater it to try to get some disease, and then do some irregular watering, things that may happen in a normal backyard garden. And hopefully through this we'll get some nice diseases. So there will be a watering schedule. That's the main thing we'll be doing. We'll be planting, we'll be watering, and we'll be out here looking at it quite frequently to try to diagnose when problems do occur.
We've got it set up so that it's going to be really easy to control up at the top. We're going to have the 3 different groups, so we're going to be able to, we'll be able to control each one of those separately, each of the treatment groups. And so it'll be real easy. It's going to be a low maintenance thing. We'll just come in, you can turn it on and then turn it off when you're finished. And it's going to be a low maintenance one. It's one of those you put in the work now so that you don't have to put in the work later on.
So the goal is hopefully we get these plants growing, we get them nice and diseased and infested, and then we can invite hopefully the public in to come to some open house type days where the students can then talk about what's going on with the plants, why it's happening, how to manage this in your own gardens potentially. So hopefully with the background of the students that we'll have out here, we'll be able to put on a pretty thorough open house and answer a lot of questions that people may have about what's going on, what's going wrong in their gardens.
Stay tuned to future episodes of Backyard Farmer, and we'll check on the progress of those students in that garden, and we'll hope that whatever they get stays on their side of the line. Not happening. All right, Wayne, you get the next picture. This is a Southeast Lincoln viewer, and they saw what they're calling spots of color on their elm leaves, and I think our viewers can see those little orange things. Southwest side of the house, they'd like to know what these are and how to treat them, if at all.
Well, they're caused by a mite. If you want to get technical, it's an areophyid mite, this very typical gall maker. And really the only thing you can do is pluck off the leaves that have them if they're an eyesore for you, or you can show off to your neighbors that you know it's an areophyid mite.
And nothing else to do.
And nothing else really to do about it. It's just a common thing.
It's a good year for galls already, I think, too. So thank you, Wayne. All right, this is another ID.
Great, let's
And this
bring it
one
on.
had some scratching of heads.
Yeah.
They're calling it a fern-looking plant. We don't know where she is, but the picture is pretty dark. Came up by itself, 2 feet tall and wide, seems to like the shady flower bed.
Yeah, this is one where we've all kind of had a look at this picture, and unfortunately, we can't really get a definitive answer based on this picture because it's kind of far away and there's the contrast issues with the shade. We had thrown around things like it maybe looks a little bit like poison hemlock, but it's also pointed out that that doesn't grow in the shade. So unfortunately, we can't really tell from this picture what that is exactly, and maybe it'd be something to send in to the extension office, and then they can better ID it than we can from that picture.
Or maybe a better picture a little closer up.
Yeah.
Maybe a picture of the stems to see if the stems are spotted the way you'd
Yeah.
see with the poison hemlock.
We tried hard to see, but you just couldn't see that,
yeah,
that spotting.
stems are pretty buried in that picture.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thanks to that viewer, send us some more. All right, this is a great question because this is sent to us from a Holdridge viewer whose son just moved to Fort Riley, Kansas. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. This is the willow. This is North Platte. This is North Platte. So it's an Australian willow with black spots and they're oozing sap. Wants to know what to do to treat it.
Yeah, well, there's not a whole lot you can do to treat it, actually. It's a condition called slime flux. And it's the result of a wound. Somehow there was some kind of a physical wound to the tree, and then a bacterium gets in there. The bacterium is not a plant pathogen. It's not necessarily affecting the living tissue of the plant. It's just kind of hanging out in that small little niche. And the tree, as a response to that, kind of oozes, and the bacterium itself creates some of that ooze, and it bleeds down the tree. It's common in elms and willows as well. Again, there isn't a whole lot you can do to cure it, to keep it from doing it. You can just make sure that you don't create any more physical abrasions to the tree so that it doesn't spread, and I guess kind of deal with it. I don't think it doesn't deteriorate much of the inner wood either, so it's the structural stability of the tree is intact. It's just maybe an eyesore.
And it's also a pretty old willow, I think. So
Age does have a lot to do with it.
yeah. Okay, so now we're going to Fort Riley, Kansas.
Okay.
Sarah, this is a viewer who thought he found wild plums growing on the ground, and his dad said it looks a little like a Texas sandbur. So what do we think this is? And they also want to know whether it's edible.
Well, yeah, the leaves do look a little bit like a sandbur leaf in that they're compound, but this is a plant called buffalo plum is a common name. Ostragalus is the botanical name for this one. This is actually a really large family of plants, over 3,000 different species. A lot of them have the common name milk vetch, and the milk vetches are not edible, but this particular Ostragalus is, this beach plum. Indians actually harvested those little fruits and would eat them. So yes, you could try this out and see if you like it. But it's a native plant in eastern Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool little thing, too. Well, coming up in just a bit, we'll have the Backyard Farmer Minute. But one familiar sight every spring right next to our garden is a colony of poppies. For this week's Green and Growing tip, we show you this wonderful flower. Poppies are one of those symbols of Memorial Day that really lets us honor our veterans. They're also a beautiful, wonderful, very, very long-lived landscape plant in the right conditions. This is kind of the traditional old Oriental poppy. They form colonies. These have probably been here for decades. They bloom typically around Memorial Day, thin tissue paper petals that then fall off. They have very rough, tough foliage that is covered with hairs, and they spread slowly. They are extremely drought tolerant. They also go dormant after they flower, and then that foliage reemerges in the fall. If you leave them undisturbed, they will bloom this way, as I said, for decades. The newer poppies, or the ones that are hybrids, have spectacular colors, beautiful flowers that are singles, doubles, white, purple, pink, red. They do not spread like this, but they also do tend to go summer dormant. So give them a condition that is dry, full sun to very light shade. You'll be able to enjoy poppies for years to come. As we said, what we showed you are the more traditional orange variety, but there are plenty of other colors to choose from, including fully purpley ones and pure white and doubles. So a nice landscape plant. All right, Wayne, you get a question. This is a viewer in Lincoln, has an acreage on the border, does keep the lawn mowed, but is really wondering whether something called Spectracide triazicide takes care of chiggers, or what would be a better idea?
Well, that particular product may not work so well for chiggers. If you really, really want to treat for chiggers, you're going to have to use something that works for mites. And in that case, you're looking at most likely malathion. Not something you probably want to be spreading all over your lawn for just the chiggers. I would recommend wearing DEET. Works really well. Put it on the lower, for like the knee down on your pant legs, and spray your shoes.
All right, so spray yourself instead of the entire landscape.
Yes.
All right. This is a Benkelman question, and it's a buffalo grass one. It's established, and his question is whether 2,4-D or preen can be used for weed control in an established buffalo grass lawn. Thinking about the label and the date and the time and the frequency, and what would you recommend for weed control in established buffalo grass?
Yeah, you could use the 2,4-D on buffalo grass, but it's still not the best time to be doing those applications. We're just getting into the annual weed season, and so those weeds are going to be bursting out of the ground. You're going to have a hard time. You have to retreat over and over, and the buffalo grass is starting to grow vigorously, and you have to out-compete those weeds. And so You could do that, but I would generally recommend waiting till later in the fall, or wait till the buffalo grass is dormant, and then just go out and do an application and just kind of clean everything up and then start fresh next year. So that's something you could try to do.
All right, excellent. All right, Kevin. This is a Lincoln viewer with rose bushes. It says half of the leaves have yellow spots on them already. Mm-hmm. And the underside, I love this, looks like yellow stuff like Cheetos crumbs.
That may be the best description of rust I've ever heard. Yeah. So the orange or bright yellow color is very indicative of rust, and rose gets rust. It's very difficult to control because those spores blow in on the wind and come and land on the plant and cause those big round spots. And if you have heavy enough infection, it will cause the plant to defoliate, and it may even affect the blossoms. So a lot of times fungicide treatment is warranted, but again, the products that we have available are preventative. So you might have missed your window of opportunity to treat. So you might want to think about next year if you have a large bed to get out there a little bit earlier as those leaves are unfolding and coming out, and get a product on there to treat. Taking care of the leaf debris in this situation, I don't believe is as helpful, because every spring this rust fungi gets blown in on the wind. So to take care of it is the spray treatment in the spring.
Oh, all right, thank you, Kevin. Sarah, this is a Seward viewer who wants to know the best variety of pear for Nebraska.
Okay, so there are a couple of, actually there's many varieties of pear that grow well in Nebraska. Pear is one of our really good tree fruits, along with apples and plums. But the thing you want to look for with pear is fire blight resistance. That's one of the big diseases we see on pears. So, whatever catalog you're looking at, check to see if you can find the pear varieties that have the best resistance to fire blight. So a couple of older cultivars that you could look for: Magnus is a good one for Nebraska, Moonglow, and Seckle is also pretty good. But there are a lot of other more modern varieties that you could look for too.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Before we take a break, let's take a minute to visit our side of the Backyard Farmer Garden. It's still been a little too wet for us to get anything into the ground, but we do have some interesting things to show you anyway. We're finally enjoying a little bit of sunshine in the Backyard Farmer Garden, but it has been very cool and very rainy. That has delayed our planting of our All-America selections, with the exception of some of our vegetables, which are in the gardens. We have radishes that have been seeded by the master gardeners, and they are sprouting. We have a new selection of broccoli and some new beets, which should be very interesting to look at. Our rhubarb looks like it's on steroids. That would be 6 pies per leaf if we wanted to harvest it. The other interesting thing is the intensity and the hard rains actually caused a lot of the subsurface materials that were underneath our planting beds to rise to the surface. And this happens in residential gardens as well. You'll see an awful lot of gravel coming up. That would be because the old greenhouses actually extended into this plot location. So when we tell gardeners to look below before they look above, it's pretty important to do that in your own garden. That's what is happening this week in the Backyard Farmer Garden. It's time for a short break. Coming up on our show, we'll have Gladys's Plant of the Week and the Lightning Round. Stay tuned for more Backyard Farmer right after these messages. Welcome back to Backyard Farmer. We've got more of your questions to answer, and later on we'll hear from Bill about part 2 of his lawn renovation. You can still phone in your questions by dialing 1-800-676-5446. While you're doing that, we'll start the lightning round. Are you ready, Sarah?
I'm ready, let's go.
This is a Northwest Omaha viewer that has an 11-year-old Weigelia. Little bit of growth, but a lot of dead. Should they cut it to the base or rogue it out?
I guess I would still err on the side of caution and give it a little bit more time. If it doesn't send out any leaves in the next couple of weeks, then you're probably going to have to pull it out.
All right. We have a Lincoln viewer who wants to know what kind of mulch to use around tomatoes.
Clean straw works well. Newspapers, several layers of newspapers, or even wood chips can do fine.
We have another viewer who wants to know whether you can till the mulch under in your garden or should you get rid of it every single year.
No, if it's straw or wood chips, certainly till it in. Even if it's paper, it'll break down if you till it into the ground, and that's fine.
All right. We have a viewer that has cotoneasters that have a lot of dead in them all the way to the ground. Should they cut them back to that live growth?
Yeah, definitely cut it back to live growth. And any really heavy, thick stems, I would take those all the way down to the ground so you get new young growth from the crown.
All right. What about using grass clippings as a mulch? This viewer has heard that you're not supposed to do that. And is it okay in the shade?
Use caution with grass clippings if you've applied broadleaf herbicides to your lawn. So if you've been spraying some dandelions or clover, then be sure you check the label directions on whether or not you can use those grass clippings in a vegetable garden or an annual flower bed.
Excellent. Nice job. We saw the lightning. We just didn't hear the thunder, did we?
No thunder tonight.
Maybe it's not raining.
I'll bring the thunder.
All right. Since you will, let's see how you do tonight. Will using the leaves of sycamore that has anthracnose affect plants in the vegetable garden, Kevin?
I don't believe so. It's a different genus of anthracnose that affects the veggies, so it should be fine.
All right. We have a viewer in Greenwood who has a flowering crab that already has leaves that are yellowing with spots. What is that and what to do?
It could either be scab or rust. Again, it's a fungicide treatment is advisable, but before the leaves are as the leaves are coming out, before you see the spots, as a preventative, and clean up the leaves in the fall to help reduce the inoculum.
All right. We have a viewer in central Nebraska that has leaf spots all over their penstemon. What should they do about that?
It's probably penstemon rust, and again, there's not a whole lot you can do curatively. It's more of a preventative thing, but it's not hurting the plant. Leave them alone.
All right. Will the cold, wet weather cause potatoes to develop blackleg later on?
Yes, that's very possible, except I think that's a Phytophthora disease, which prefers warmer soils, but the cool and the wet, and the wet especially, for sure.
All right. So
There's the thunder.
there's the
I did bring
you
it.
brought the thunder. All right, Bill, are you ready?
Yep,
We just have too much fun.
let's do it.
All right. Okay, Bill, so with our flooding conditions, how long will turf survive under standing water?
It can survive pretty long if it's high standing water. If it's low standing water and it gets sunny right afterwards, the water can get really hot and it will actually bake the grass. So it depends on the depth of the water.
All right. With these really soggy soils, viewers are concerned about the effect of their lawn mower, the wheels themselves on the turf.
Yeah, the rutting.
Should they mow or let it grow?
You know, I still err on the side of mowing. The mower's generally pretty light, so it might put a little bit of a rut there. But try to move your pattern around so you're not going in the same spot over and over. That's the real problem.
All right. Should viewers aerate now after it dries out because we've had so much rain, or are we out of the window?
After it dries out, but I wouldn't be putting that heavy equipment on now and risking the compaction. You'll do more compaction than you'll alleviate with aerating right now.
All right. What about controlling violets now? Is it effective?
Not really.
All right. Can you still patch seed if you've got dead spots in your lawn?
Yeah, it's still cool, and we should get pretty good take, just as long as it doesn't get too hot too quick.
All
No
right.
problem.
Excellent. Nice job. Ready, Wayne?
Let's go.
This is a viewer in Palmyra that says he has seen red eggs on the silver maple leaves.
Probably not eggs. Another areophyte might. Nothing
right.
you can do.
Does neem oil work to control the dreaded phlox plant bug?
As long as they're the nymphs, the softer bodied they are, the better the neem oil will work.
All right. Tiny white scale things on this person's broadleaf evergreen euonymus. Is it too late to do an oil or something with it?
I'm not sure if it's too late or not on that. If you wanted, you could use something that has acephate in it. That would likely work well for scale. And because it's a systemic product, it'll get to it even after they're done with the crawler stage.
All right. We have a Lincoln viewer who says she has borers that are ruining her elderberry. What in the world is that?
There is an elderberry borer. It's a very attractive beetle. It's an iridescent purple and blue on the hind end and the back and the front end, with a nice orange stripe down the middle.
And what should she do about it?
Not a lot you can do if you're planning on using the berries because they're going to be inside that stem.
All right. Nice job, all. It looks like we had a three-way tie.
So you're the lone loser.
I typically.
You won once, but you always forget it's lightning. All right, Sarah, what has Gladys brought us today?
Well, we were talking about Baptisia earlier, and here we have our follow-up on Baptisia. This is the more common color for the false blue indigo. It can be a darker purple like this or a lighter blue, but somewhere in the bluish range is the typical color. And again, these are great plants for a garden. The traditional blue indigos usually get in that same height range, around 2 to 3 feet, although there are dwarfs that are shorter than that, so if you're looking for something smaller, that's available too. And once they're established in a garden, they're going to be there for a long, long time. They're very hardy and don't require a lot of special care to do well, so they're a great perennial. The other plant that Gladys brought for us is this white flower plant in the back. This is actually a tree. It's called fringe tree, and obviously they're blooming right now. Fringe tree are kind of a small tree. They're in the 15 to 25 foot height range. There's a species of fringe tree that is actually native in the southeastern parts of the United States, and then there's another one that's native in China. But both of them do well for us here in the Midwest. And so if you're looking for a smaller tree, maybe you need to plant under some power lines, or you just have some size restrictions. A fringe tree would be a nice tree to plant, and it's kind of unusual. We don't see people using this very often, so it would be something a little bit different.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah, and thanks to Gladys. And the fringe tree also smells just
smells great.
Wonderful. All right, so you can just imagine that, viewers. Okay, so this is an Omaha viewer, and she has a linden, which looks like that, and then the base has these pretty nasty holes in it. They think it looks like it's being invaded by some sort of insect, and they want to know how to diagnose and what to do.
Looking at these pictures, it looks like there's quite a bit of damage to the tree besides the borers when you look at that. So what I'm thinking here is that the borers are taking advantage of a weakened tree. It's either stressed or in the process of dying, and with the large top dieback, may not be a tree that's viable for too much longer, and there's not going to be anything you can do about the borers at this point. They're just simply taking advantage of an opportunity.
They may have somebody from Extension come out and look at it potentially and see if it's a hazard too. Yeah.
Or if you're looking at a total top dieback, it may just be wiser to get it removed.
Right. All right, thanks. Okay, this is a Richardson County question, Bill, and it was actually as we were down there live, and they had windmill grass, and they have windmill grass, and they want to know what to do about windmill grass.
Yeah, I think it's in buffalo grass, right?
Well, there's a buffalo grass question, and then there are 2 or 3 others that have it just in general. So we got the question about 3 times in 2 or 3 different types of turf.
Yeah, for controlling windmill grass, there's only, it's difficult to control because of its life cycle. It's a warm season grass, kind of like our crabgrass is. And so the only thing we really have for control is mesotrione tenacity, which is labeled for lawns. It's a newer herbicide, and it's going to require repeat applications to keep that windmill grass in check. But until that herbicide, we had no options to control that particular weed. So that is something you can find to help keep that in check.
All right, thank you, Bill. Kevin, this is a strange fungus that was sent in by a viewer west of Lincoln at the Lancaster-Seward County line, and found it along a creek and wondered if we know what it is.
It's pretty neat. I believe that is the Western Scarlet Cup fungus. And it's got an elegant name. It's scarlet, so that's pretty cool.
You guys are as bad as entomologists.
Right? It's so cool. It's very neat. Look at that color. It's a wood rotter, or it's a saprophyte, so it's just taking advantage of all the dead soil organic matter there. There's really nothing you can do about it. Just enjoy it. They're pretty cool. The cup structure you're seeing is called an apothecia, and it's the fruiting body of the fungus. And it's used to forcefully exert its spores out. And they've actually have video where they put these guys in a dark room and you can see puffs of spores coming out. It just shoots it out of this apothecium. So really neat organism.
And very pretty.
And pretty.
All right, Sarah, this is not so pretty. This is an Omaha viewer who has a redbud. And overall pick of the tree is like that. And then it's got these interesting 1, 2, 3 codominant stems. He wonders whether he should prune something out for a specific leader or start over.
Yeah, you know, this is why we really recommend starting to prune trees when they're young so that we can avoid this kind of a situation occurring once a tree's put on some growth. Because you don't have a lot of really good options here. I mean, you could take out that center section. Still, you have 2 sections of the trunk that are coming off pretty close to each other, which is not great as far as trunk strength. But I think taking out that center limb is probably your best option here. So that's what I would probably do.
Yeah, and then cross your fingers.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll continue
Hopefully.
to not live and not split.
Well, a few weeks ago, we did take our cameras out to Bill's house to hear him talk about renovating his front lawn. Bill had a few issues with dog spot, uneven ground, and thinning turf. Right now, we're going to hear part 2, where Bill tells us about fertilizing, mowing, and proper watering.
Here we are in our second episode of spring seedling establishment of this lawn. And in the first episode, we really talked about how we get that seed cut into the lawn, and we can generally apply those methods to both the spring and fall seeding. And the trick to making seeding in the spring successful is really how we manage those seedlings in the springtime. And so what we did is first we seeded, then after we seeded, I went out with a herbicide, Roundup, and I sprayed out the lawn. So the entire lawn, the Kentucky bluegrass that was there was going to die, and it won't affect that tall fescue seed because it only works on green leaves. And then we also added a herbicide called Tenacity or Mesotrione, and that provides some pre-emergence application to help keep those summer weeds from germinating, which is a big reason why our spring seedings fail. So we did that application right after we seeded, and it worked out really well. The grass went from, green, and it slowly died, and then as that grass died, we had nice germinating tall fescue seedlings, and so we had this nice seamless transition from one grass to the other grass. We then proceeded to water that turf, and because it's tall fescue, it's a large seed, I watered about 3 times a day, and for large seed, you want to water a little bit higher amount and a little bit less frequent. If it's Kentucky bluegrass seed, which is smaller, you want to water a couple extra times a day, but for a shorter duration because those small seeds dry out a little bit quicker, and so, but they also re-wet really quick. So we did that. The seed germinated in about 10 days, which is fantastic for the spring seeding, and then we just watched it grow. We also applied a starter fertilizer, which is a fertilizer that has a high middle number on that NPK. And so we made that application as soon as that seed germinated, right when the seed needed that fertilizer, the fertilizer was there for it. And we'll continue to reapply that fertilizer about every 2 weeks until the grass is fully mature. Then the question is, when do we start to mow? And a lot of homeowners, when they do seeding in the spring or the fall, they wait too long for that first mowing. You really want to get that first mowing done as soon as it's at a height that you want to mow at. So if I want to mow at 3 inches, when that grass gets a little bit above 3 inches, I want to start mowing. You may not think it does very much, but actually it's really important because it makes that grass start to mature and put out new leaves, and that's what's going to densen up our yard. We don't want to let it get to like 6 inches and then scalp it down. That puts a lot of stress on those seedlings, and then they can die later on. And so now we're going to continue some frequent mowing, and we'll do a follow-up application with Tenacity here. Now it's been about a month, just to kind of really help with any weeds that might have popped up and add some more pre-emergence activity for our summer annual like crabgrass. And so we'll do these steps. We'll dial our irrigation back as the seeds become more and more. Now it's about a month, and so we don't irrigate anymore, just once a day. And that grass will mature out and be great. And so using these steps, we can make spring seeding successful.
Getting your turf off to the right start is really only the first step. to Healthy Turf year after year. So we're going to return to Bill's Lawn in a couple of weeks to hear more tips on keeping that lawn green for the whole season. So that would be no dogs.
Yeah, he's ready to try to get onto it. And I go, no, backyard, sir.
All right, you get a picture question, Wayne. This is a Cumming County viewer. Peach tree, it's been doing great this spring. The leader tried to leaf, then it quit. The leaves didn't mature. Outer branches are leafing well, but then saw golden brown, gooey, slimy stuff. A direct quote on the trunk. And wonders what is going on, or is this tree a loss?
Well, one of the common things we would think about when we start to see a peach tree oozing like this might be peach tree borer. However, usually they hit the main part of the trunk first, and they'll move up into the branches like that later under a heavy infestation. And I believe the viewer said they couldn't find any exit or holes underneath the slime. So we're probably looking at something more up Kevin's alley as far as the disease. If you were looking at peach tree borer, you should see a white crumbly frass, which is what the peach tree borer will be pushing out of its hole.
Okay.
Yeah, they can slime as a result of cankers, but I would just look at the stem of or the trunk, and you should be able to see a sunken and darkened area of the stem if there is indeed a canker, and it'll look different than a healthy side of the stem. So if you see some areas that are darker and maybe a little bit more sunken, it could be a canker or some kind of an infection.
And if it were my peach tree, I would be purchasing another one. All right, Bill, this is a viewer who wants to know what this interesting little weed that has come up essentially in kind of moist mulch beds. What is it, and is there any control necessary short of just pulling it up?
I would just pull it. That's water pot. It's an annual. It's got a real weak taproot. You should be able to pull it fairly easily. Generally, you don't see it in big mats. You might see a couple of them here or there. That picture, there's a little bit more there. But it's a summer annual, so I would just recommend just pulling it. If you did want to spray it with something, most anything works on it. It's pretty sensitive to all of our herbicides. So, but pulling is probably the best option.
All right, thank you, Bill. All right, Kevin, multiple pictures of peonies that look kind of like this one, and I think you said you got a sample in that didn't look so hot either. This is a central Nebraska viewer. It's a well-established plant. What's going on here?
It's difficult to determine because we've had so many late frosts. So frost damage will represent itself on peonies as this bleaching. So the leaves will look almost white, and it can be interveinal like that, where you see the veins are green, but then the rest of the leaf was this bleached white color. However, there are, I think, 3 different viruses that can also do the same type of thing, and there aren't really great ways to test for that virus. So getting a diagnosis can be difficult. So determining between frost damage and a virus isn't easy. I guess what I would recommend maybe is waiting until later on in the season to see if things progress, if they continue to get worse, or if next year it's worse. It could be a virus, and then you'd want to rogue it out. But it could just be frost damage, so you might want to give it a little while and see if it kind of greens up, or if next year it greens up, you might not need to worry about it.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Sarah, this is, you get this one, even though it's kind of an odd one perhaps, but it's happened Sunday near Roca in the storm. Maple looks a little bit maybe like an autumn blaze, cracked right off. And then what they're really wondering is what has caused this discoloration in the trunk?
Well, the discoloration is caused by a wood rot fungus, which is gotten into the trunk through some kind of a wound. It could be an old pruning wound, or it could have been some other kind of physical damage. But you can just see there how it's expanded, and it's gradually moving its way around the trunk. Probably created a weak spot in the trunk right there, and so if there was some excessive wind load in a storm, that could result in the trunk cracking and breaking the way that we saw in that picture. So, you have to be careful when you're pruning not to damage the bark or the structures that allow the callus tissue to develop to seal over the pruning wounds, and obviously prevent any physical damage of other types if possible.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. All right, Wayne, you get a question from a Lincoln viewer who had zucchini south side of the house last year, and apparently the borers got more of it than he did. He wants to know whether it can be avoided this year or how to treat.
Avoiding squash vine borer in anything can be difficult. You can do floating row covers, but that doesn't work so well when you want bees to visit for pollination. You can try treating, but then you got to run the risk of affecting your pollinators on top of that. You can do some real careful applications of a permethrin type product to the nodes on the plant and avoid the flowers and try to get them around there to keep them from getting in. But otherwise, it's quite difficult.
All right, thank you. We have another maple question, Bill. This is a viewer who says they have a Norway maple that is so large and dense that their turf will not live. They want to know what kind will grow in complete shade.
None of them.
Good answer.
But if you're going to try it, if it's not too shady, this is your bet right here. This is what I'm growing underneath my maple in my front yard. It's that tall fescue. It's going to be your best bet. And if you can't grow this there, then look for something else because you're not going to grow grass under that environment.
Exactly, especially with the shallow roots of a maple tree.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. This is a Fairbury viewer, Kevin, who has tomatoes 18 inches tall, seeing dark spots about 1/4 of an inch around on the leaves, and the leaves are curling and then dropping off.
I would ask if it's the bottom leaves. I'm guessing it's the bottom leaves that are showing that. There's a fungal disease called early blight that's caused by an anthracnose fungus that is very common here, and it'll cause spots. I would take a look inside that spot on the leaf too and see if you see concentric rings, almost like a bullseye. If you do, that's another good indication of early blight. Some copper-based fungicides can go a long way. Again, they're preventative, so you want to put them on before you start seeing those spots, but you might be able to provide some protection on the leaves that aren't affected.
So kind of the follow-up, because this is a tomato question too, from Malcolm viewer, is the leaves are curling.
Well, there are a ton of things that will cause tomato leaves to curl. A lot of times it's water stress issue, but temperature stress can also cause them, heat stress, which doesn't seem likely given the conditions that we've had lately. Even I think root anoxia, so if they have soggy feet, if the soil's too wet, they can roll their leaves as well. So there's many things that can do that, and then there's several different viruses that can induce that type of symptom. So there's no hard and fast answer to curly tomato leaves.
We need better weather.
Yes.
Sarah, we also have a tomato question. This is apparently somebody who has flowers already on pretty small plants. They're wondering whether she should take those flowers off and let the plant get a little more oomph.
Yeah, so the theory here is that if you take off that first flower cluster, it can allow the plants to root in better and become more established before you go into fruit production mode. I don't know that there's really any good hard and fast research on this, if it really does provide those benefits that gardeners talk about. If you think the plants are weak and not well established, then maybe that would be a good thing to do. But otherwise, if they have good root systems and they're nice, strong, healthy plants, I would go ahead and leave those flower clusters on.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, we have a Twitter question to shoot out there for our visitors, and this is at BYFUNL, which is, why do these paper wasps like the peonies so much? Is it the nectar or is it the pollen? So if you tweet your answer to at BYFUNL next week, we will see if we can stump the chump, which in this case will be the entomologist, Wayne. All right, so, and you get a question. This is a Wahoo viewer who has large black flies in the house. They have tight windows. Says they're bigger than regular flies. Could they be hatching inside?
They could potentially be hatching inside. They could have tried to overwintered. They crawl into tight spaces anywhere they can find a warm spot to go. Without a picture, it's hard to tell which fly it is, but they can follow you in when you're walking in and out of the house too. So it's not really necessarily inside. They could be outside. They could be coming inside.
Fly swatter.
Fly swatter, yeah. And by the way, I'm not on next week, so I won't be the chump.
I know. Okay, Bill. This is a viewer who has read of a weed killer mix that uses salt, vinegar, and soap.
Sounds like a bad idea.
Okay, good. Good answer.
Okay. The next question.
So, Kevin, a Springfield viewer, wants to know whether morel mushrooms can, in the woodland, the spores can be spread around if he or she harvests them in a really interesting kind of a bag or a sack. So they'll
so they're
spread
like-
all around.
They
Exactly.
want more. Yeah, it's very difficult to try to encourage morel mushroom development. You can try to spread their spores to the four winds, but they're really finicky, and they will find the food source that is suitable. And then the thing that's interesting too is that fungi grow via these filamentous strands, so they can move throughout your soil and end up in a different spot. And it's very difficult to predict where they're going to be, when they're going to happen, and to try to increase their numbers. Literature does say that you will see morel mushrooms pop up after some environmental disturbance, so that could be a fire or a storm knocks down a bunch of trees, and then you might see more. But other than that, there's really no way to increase their cultivation.
All right, Sarah, in 5 seconds, are we seeing any alive weeping cherries in this state?
No, the weeping cherries took it really hard this winter, so many, many deaths.
All right, all right. And unfortunately, in addition to the death of the weeping cherries, that is all the time we have for Backyard Farmer. We want to say thanks to our panel for another great show. We also want to say thanks to our producer, Gavin Felix. This is his last time to produce us. He's handing over the reins and going on to bigger and better big red things, and heaven only knows what. But thanks to Gavin. Thanks also to our panel for another great show, and to everybody who submitted questions and pictures. Helping us answer the phones tonight, we had Gladys Juring, George Edgar, Bertine Loop, John Cariato, and Nebraska Extension Horticulture Assistant Terry James. From Finke Gardens was Luann Finke. Next time on Backyard Farmer, we're going to take a look at a student gardening project at Omaha Bryan High School. We'll hear about how the project was planned, planted, and will be managed over the summer months. So good night, good gardening, and we'll see you all next week right here on Backyard Farmer.